Good morning. Welcome to the latest in our presentations of speakers sponsored by the IDEAL Initiative. IDEAL stands for Initiative for Digital Education for Accelerated Learning. In May 2018, the university was granted funds from the Davis Foundation in order to transform current undergraduate pedagogical practice at Pierce through the enhancement across the curriculum of digital skills and literacy, referred to as DSL. Our guest this morning is Adam Del Marcel, MFA, a graphic designer who's a member of the faculty at the Pennsylvania College of Art and Design. Adam's presentation is titled Hacking the Street. Please join me in welcoming him to Franklin Pierce.
Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you for having me. It's amazing to me that I'm even getting invited to places to speak. Like I said, I spoke at UW-Madison last year, and I got a letter in the mail that was like the Visiting Scholar series, and my wife opened up. She's like, "Give me a fucking break!" So anyway, so thank you, Paul. Thanks, Chris, for having me. Like this is great, allowing me to share this work with you that I've been now for the last couple of years taking all over the place, all over the country, and trying to engage students and their responsibilities, knowing that they can do far more than just feed the marketplace with their work. So that's what I'm trying to do. So this body of work that I'm going to share with you, I'm not going to talk about anything previous to this because I feel like everything previous that I've done was leading up for me to find this calling and do this work that I'm doing now. So in 2014, my younger brother, Joey, died of a heroin overdose. He died in my home. I found him in my home. The police, when they came, I had no idea that he was using heroin at this time. Although, I mean, one part of the story too is outside of being a designer and an educator and a working artist is that for 15 years I was a crisis counselor in my local hospital also. So not only was I doing all of those things, but I was seeing really what happens in every hometown. If you want to know what happens in your city, just hang around the emergency room and you'll learn a lot about what is going on in your town. So I was doing that work, and then for a long time, people were starting to die at this time in mass numbers. You know, every weekend that I was working, 4, 5, 6 people were coming to the emergency room overdosing and dying. This is before Narcan or naloxone was being carried by people. If you guys don't know what that is, that's the opioid reversal drug. So I was already getting to kind of the end of my tenure doing this because I just couldn't take this. And then my brother died, and that compartmentalization I had for my life got all shook up, and there was this big box to my life in it, and I was like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do now. So what I started to do is I started to draw and make work about our family's experience. We were treated very poorly by our local police department, local authorities, local government, and I found out kind of firsthand how little was being done and how little the general public knew about what was happening. And if we did know anything, it was skewed information that was not anything that was going to make local government have to do anything more than what they were doing, which is kind of the status quo. So I started to make work about this, not for any other reason than it's the only way I could process my grief. So I'm a printmaker, so I was drawing these like terrible things and this, telling the story over and over and over again and making screen prints until my arms couldn't move anymore. So printing and printing and printing and printing. And I did that for, I don't know, maybe a year, and my home just filled up with this work, these terrible stories. So that's the thing about this type of work too, that I think you need to, especially if you have students that are thinking about venturing into this type of work, you need to understand that as visual makers, it's easy to make this work. That's what we do, but it's not easy to live with it once it's in the world. So you've now made something that now is out there and has to be, and you have to deal with that. So on the second anniversary of my brother's death, I took 1,000 of these posters and I plastered my entire hometown with these posters for no other reason than it was a way to honor him. I had to purge the work out of my home. It was taking over my life. And I put it up with no expectation. They'd hang on the pole like every other gig poster. They'd rot away. And I feel good enough to know that I put something out there. I said something that was for him, and then, that was it. But, what happened is that, kind of a couple days after they went up, local police started harassing other artists in the town. They had no idea who did this. The mayor in our city on the third day ordered the police to destroy all of the work off the street because it said things they didn't want to hear, and they went out there. And then what they did is they took all of my stuff down, citing an ordinance that you can't hang on light standards or poles, yet they left every yard sale sign, every gig poster, everything up around it. So they discriminated against me because they didn't want the information out there. So this is the power of what a simple poster can do. So when you guys are thinking about like ways to kind of push the digital literacy of your campus and all these new tech tools and things like that, sometimes I think it's better to slow down a little bit and not, I mean, that's good, but remember that the power of a poster is more powerful than anything we can do digitally, right? I believe that. I mean, what this did in my hometown is it started conversations that weren't there before. Is this really happening? I didn't know this was part of this. Is this many people die? So it started this conversation, and the power structure in my hometown did not want that information out there. They were hiding that to keep us from asking questions, because asking questions leads to them having to spend money towards the problem. And that's not, at the core of this, even now that we're starting to talk about this issue and we understand this is an epidemic, still at the core of it, they do not want to spend money towards this problem. There's a real have and have nots, us and them type feel to addiction that's based on years of stereotype, years of pop culture, terrible pop culture references, tons of years of addict language that didn't help anyone. This poster probably is the one that got him tore down. That's the coroner in my hometown on the right. That's the detective in charge of my brother's case on the left. And I started to tell conversations, and I also started to regurgitate the words they said to my family, which they didn't like to hear. The chief of police was like, "We don't appreciate you putting our words on posters." And I was like, "Well, don't fucking say it. You know what I mean? Don't say these things, and I won't put them back out there for my community to think about." Yeah, sure. So this poster says the coroner saying, "Here's another heroin death-related death certificate or heroin-related death certificate to add to the pile. File it under low priority." And the detective is saying, "I'll feed the family a line and shut it down. This one's cut and dry." So in my hometown, in all hometowns, you have to understand that local coroners are very important figures. They decide often what gets investigated and what doesn't based on what they find. And in my hometown, they could care less about those that are dying from overdose. So when folks come in, there's rarely an autopsy done. So if an autopsy isn't done, we can't figure out what was in the person's system. We can't warn anybody else that's on the street. And we can't record numbers that are accurate. So this year we're on track to lose 80,000 people to overdose in this country. That is a statistic that is way skewed. I would say it's probably closer to 120,000 based on my traveling around the country. And those are numbers that aren't given to us. So we need local coroners to be doing their jobs in more efficient ways, and government to be making them do things in a standardized way. This coroner also, like I said, on the day that my brother died, told my mother, he was an addict. What do you expect? So let's also talk about some type of sensitivity towards what is happening in our country, and also understanding that even the most hardened right-wing Republican who thinks that addiction is a choice changes their mind pretty fucking quick when their kid dies, and that's pretty amazing. And that's happening 80,000, or it happens 197 times every single day in America right now. That's him. The detective also, on the day that my brother died, I started to get mad, and I was like, what are we going to do? We have to get out there. More people are going to die. What are we going to? And he's just like, you have to lower your expectations. I've seen hundreds of these, and there's nothing remarkable about your brother or his death. I am a college professor living in my hometown. That's the answer I get. Imagine what the Hispanic family across town that doesn't speak any English gets. Significantly less than that. So that gives you a little bit of a view as to how this is being handled right now, opposed to popular opinion and all of this news coverage that this epidemic is getting right now. So I was making all these pieces. I found my brother. I had to call 911. So I started to scrawl out the 911 call really big and cut these giant woodblock prints. And I don't know why I did it other than I had to get those things out of here. So this one says, "Help me, I think he's dead. Turn him over and check for a pulse. Oh my God, he's gurgling. Help is on the way." So that was little excerpts from that call that I had to make as much as I could retain it. I tried to get the actual transcript of that call from my local government and the recording, and they refused to give it to me because they knew what I was going to do with it. So I'm in a legal fight with them right now to get it, but I'm pretty sure they deleted it at this point. So again, making more posters. talking about this. This is what I could control right now. I could draw, and that's what I could do. But once this work got tore down, and the police were ordered by the mayor, it also became national news within a week. So the Huffington Post picked up the story, so they had to back off a little bit. So now I kind of work with the community in my town where they have to gauge whether or not they're going to harass me or try to arrest me, because it's going to make national news every time they do it now. So them tearing down the work and destroying it was actually the best thing they could have possibly did, because they made it more important than it was previous. So all of this work too, this is the total side for the professors in the room too, which I guess a lot of you probably are, is that I have my students writing with everything that they make, and I encourage you to do the exact same thing. So during this time, I was also writing essays along with the work that I was building, just to clarify for myself what I was saying, where I was coming from, and just to have this record. So I was, putting a hard deadline on myself, or a hard stipulation on myself, that every time I made a piece of work, I had to write 800 words about that thing that I made. For better or worse. Some of the writing's good, some of it's shit, but it's a good record of that time. So this is a piece I did, the coroner didn't like. So there's dice on there, and the bottom of this print, I signed it, how our local coroner determines a death by overdose. So he rolls the dice, and that's what he decides, and that's what he writes on the death certificate. So in most places too, on death certificates, it reads accidental multiple substance overdose. With that, they have to investigate less. If they make it a heroin overdose, they have to investigate it in a different way. So I'm getting them to try to change the way that they document, so we can investigate things more thoroughly. And this, like I said, think about this too. Like, I'm a graphic designer. That's kind of my lane, and a printmaker. And now I'm like getting into the heavy politics of my town and trying to figure out the law and trying to figure out how far I can push this or push that. So it's kind of amazing where we end. Circumstance kind of ends us up at times. So I include in this talk, I include some of my influences in here. So this is James Baldwin. Paul told me you guys have a big James Baldwin collection in your library. Get your students to read those books. If they're interested in this type of work, this is really the only person they have to read. He is, I guess he gets pigeonholed and siloed in this only being a civil rights leader, and he was, but he's a humanist. And he really, if you want to learn about kind of how we can get our country out of the place it's in right now, read James Baldwin. He's a captivating speaker, lots of amazing lectures and videos out there for you to check out, and someone who is like grossly overlooked in high school. He should be introduced in high school, but definitely overlooked in college as well, on university level. So he's somebody that he's probably my largest influence. So just real quick before I get to this digital stuff that I'm going to show you, this is kind of how my work starts. So I'm late at night, I'm drawing, I draw these two police officers, these kind of seedy looking individuals shaking hands, and then in a week later it turns into something that looks like that. So it's like a poster that I made during that time. It's like a 6-color screen print, letterpress, throwing like everything like printmaking at it that I could. For what purpose? I'm not sure why I made this thing, other than I was compelled to make this work during this time. So this, and then sometimes like through my investigation and through my research, something like this, I'll regurgitate it again, and it'll turn into something like this. So during this time, I was getting very, very apathetic towards police. So what I did is I picked a couple of the guys that were a little bit more sympathetic to what I was doing. I took them out and bought them dinner, and we got drunk together, and we talked, and I connected to them as humans. And they also then shared like amazing stories with me that I knew were happening, but then I had this kind of like these people that were letting me know that these things actually, it's true. Like, so these conversations are happening. So this is an actual quote from a police officer, a Lebanon police officer. Before they went out that night, they sit around and talk about what's happening in the town. They pass out the Narcan, and some of them are like, fuck Narcan, let them die. I have no interest in doing this. And there's a part of it that you have to understand, like they are the first responders. They see the same people over and over and over again. So I understand that is difficult, but we need to be holding these individuals to a higher standard in our communities. And apathy needs to build over time, not deteriorate, and most times it deteriorates. So it's something that I really would be interested in doing, like apathy training with police officers through this work. So that's something that I'm looking, to possibly do. Right now in my town, they want nothing to do with me. They love nothing more to throw me in jail and not hear from me. So it probably won't happen in Lebanon, Pennsylvania anytime soon, but somewhere else possibly. So this print, like the first ones that I did, I signed them with my thumbprint with the hope that they would run my thumbprint, take more time finding out who this artist was that was making this work than doing their jobs and saving people. I did that until a friend was like, you can like get your identity stolen through your fingerprint. I was like, well, all I have is like a $5 in a Van Halen T-shirt, so they're not going to steal much, but it's so yeah. So anyways, so after the posters got torn down a couple of times, I had a local business owner that was really apathetic and interested and had a personal stake in this, and he called me and was like, what would you think about covering the entire front of my building in your posters? And I was like, yeah, I would definitely do that. So this is a great story. So I was on this ladder in my hometown. This is like 10 o'clock at night, and this location is right next to the only kind of bougie restaurant in our town. It's not even there anymore, like, 'cause Lebanon doesn't keep things for very long. So I'm on this ladder doing this, and all of a sudden, like 4 police cars like converge like on the location. They thought I was poster bombing this place without permission, and the owner walked out and was like, no, he has permission to be here. He can be here and do this. So I got to watch like 4 officers like deflatedly walk away into the night. It was like, so good. Like I think about it now, and I'm just like, that was a good moment. So anyway, and again, I think sometimes I've toned it down a lot. If you would have saw me speak a year ago, I would have ranted about police and what they do. I'm more apathetic to them, but I will say that we need to do a lot more than we're doing, and we need to push them and understand that they're here to serve us, and they're here to also be apathetic, and not just, add to the prison industrial complex by arresting every fucking person for minimal things. So this was in our local paper. Like this only stayed up for a couple of days too. Someone tore this down too, and my suspicion is the mayor had something to do with that too, but I can't prove that. So this was in our local paper, and then I found this picture, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, and it like made me almost cry. It shows like the power of the print, like 100 years apart from each other, right? So this is my work, and then this is a John Hartfeld poster from 1928. I love that there's a guy in a derby here and a guy with a fitted cap here. It's just so good. So I think sometimes when we're doing this work and we're staying in it, we get led to where we need to go. We find these things because we're meant to find these things. So yes, I thought that was pretty great. So one of the design tricks that I was using, even though I didn't quite know that I was doing it at the time, is I was using local imagery in a way and putting a twist on it. So if you're from Pennsylvania and you're ingrained or you understand like Pennsylvania Dutch, or Amish kind of symbolism. So these hex symbols that hang on every single barn in Pennsylvania are kind of are burned into our memories. And I started to make this image. I made this image, and then I added this terrible wreath around the outside of it. So it's a design trick. So this can hang in a room, and you can see it, and you know it, and then when you get closer, you realize you're getting closer to something that you don't necessarily want to get close to. And that's really an important way to do this type of work. Is that it's really easy to play one side. It would be really easy for me to sit up here and be like, fuck ICE. I believe that. But who does that pander to? That panders to the people that already agree with me, and it makes Trump supporters and on the other side foam at the mouth. So that all that does is ingrain sides, and we need to figure out a way to bring those sides together so that we can start to have real discussion. Because right now, being entrenched on either side is doing nothing for us. And like I said, this is a design way of pulling people closer to things that they wouldn't normally want to get close to. I'll tell you, like, one of the things is like this was never meant to happen. It just did because I keep making this work and I'm staying on it. But I think a couple of months after the police destroyed my work, the Library of Congress in DC contacted me, and they acquired an entire set of all of the work that I'm making for their permanent collection. So I love the idea that this work was destroyed, and months later, it's in the most important print archive in our country. And I'm glad to have it there because it's an educational tool. It's used, and it's not a museum. It's an archive, so you guys can go there and pull this work out and experience it, and hopefully we're leaving a document behind. Like an artist's job, I think, and a designer's job is to document what it means to be alive in our time. And then after that, people can excavate the work. And most likely, they're going to be like, Jesus, like, what were these people doing? That's okay. Maybe we'll be on the nose on certain things, but it's there as a way to be able to for future generations to excavate our work. So all of the work, even the projections I'm going to show you and the digital work, all of it is story based. So this one is an officer in my hometown, my studio. In Lebanon, there's a parking lot that the cops love to ticket in. So I saw him out there, so I went out and I was like, hey man, we kind of know each other. And I was like, hey, like what's going on, man? I heard like 5 people died this week. Like, what are you guys doing? And he's like, we're not allowed to do anything. And I was like, well, I don't understand that. Why? And he said, first off, our heroin task force is only 2 people for a 25,000 person city. So he was giving tickets the week before in our hometown, and he saw somebody selling down the way. So he went down, and sure enough, there was someone selling heroin on the street. He arrested the guy, took him in. At the end of his shift, he was pulled in by our chief in our town, and he was formally reprimanded and written up because his job was meters that day and not arresting drug dealers. So think about that. I mean, that 75 cents they're pulling out of that meter was more important than the 5, 10 lives it might have saved by taking that shit off the street. And that's the thing you have to understand about heroin and where we're at right now in our country, is that it's like the AIDS epidemic was in the 80s and 90s, where we had to rethink sex. Now we have to rethink drug use. So the idea of like, when I came up, I could do every drug under the sun. It was dangerous, but I was probably going to live, and it was fun. Now, the drugs that are on the street right now, fentanyl is in almost everything. 2 milligrams of fentanyl will kill you, like almost immediately. So you have to rethink drug use now. It's one of the things. So when I travel to colleges and universities, I often bring Narcan with me to give to students. I also bring fentanyl test strips so that when they're doing drugs at parties, they can test their drugs before the party. And then if it says it has fentanyl in it, they can make a decision for themselves. Am I going to use this or am I not going to use it? That's the kind of stuff that should be standard in university health centers now. The same as condoms. You can get them there. You should be able to get things to test your drugs. We're always going to use them. It's always going to happen. We're never going to eradicate drug use. And the reason why we're in this thing we're in right now is because Nixon declared a war on drugs in 1971. That's it. That was the foundation that was built for this epidemic to happen. It's a matter of fact. And since then, we spent $1 trillion on this thing, and more people are dying now than ever. Violence is up, deaths are up. Everything is accentuated because of that one move, and then perpetuated in the 80s with "Say No to Drugs." Like, come on! Like, if it was that easy, like, I mean, when I was a kid, I wore a "Say No to Drugs" T-shirt and did drugs because we thought it was funny, because it didn't talk to us, it didn't say anything, and it didn't do anything. So we have to rethink it. I know you brought me in here to talk about like digital literacy, and now I'm giving you a lecture on like this, but that's the price you pay when you bring an activist to campus. That's what I'm going to do. So, so artistic influence. I just throw this in here because, so this is a graphic designer. Chris, do you know who this is? You're a graphic designer?
Yeah, a little bit.
Who is it? Natalia didn't know it either, so don't worry. So that's all right. So I said that Natalia Ilyin is this design like intellectual.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so she teaches at Cornish College of the Arts, and I asked her the same thing, and she couldn't get it. So I was like, oh yeah, like. So this is H.N. Workman. That's who this is. So he was a Dutch designer. He was a graphic designer, owned a print shop, was kind of a down and out guy. He hated doing traditional graphic design. He was a terrible businessman. He was constantly putting his businesses under, but he was making experimental work with typography during this time, like light years ahead of its time. So this is one little example up in the top right there. And then some stencil work he was doing at the bottom. And he did not fit in any art media. He gets lumped in with Dadaism a lot. He's not a Dadaist. He gets lumped in with the Still, which is like Pete Mondrian and those people. He's not one of those folks. He was totally doing his own thing and paid the price for it. Nobody really understood in his life. But the thing he did is when Germany occupied Holland, Germany was taking all of the letterpress type, which is lead, and they were taking it for munitions for the war. But some of these graphic designers hoarded some of this type and hid it, which they were killed for. And they started making this underground publication, which is that little example down there, called In Occupied Territory. And it was all about raising spirits in occupied Holland. And it was, I own that one at the bottom. It's like one of my prized possessions. But he was making this thing because he was compelled to make it. He had to make it. And 3 days before Holland was liberated, he was executed by the Nazis for making this work. So he eventually died for this work. So he's like, in graphic design history, he's a one-liner at best. Total shame. There's one little monograph out by him that's totally worth picking up for a couple of bucks on Amazon. So H.N. Workman is his name. Totally interesting guy. So here's some more of the poster work that I did. again, like I'm starting to make some of this stuff thinking about my community because I know that they're engaging it. So how are we doing time-wise?
I would say like 20 minutes until questions.
Okay, so I'm not going to show you this video. Do you want to see the video? All right, yeah, parts of it. So, okay, so I started to my work was getting destroyed. So how do I keep my work from getting destroyed? Even though this being destroyed was getting it press, how do I get it out there? So what I did is I started the GoFundMe campaign, and I asked my hometown to donate money for me to buy a decommissioned theater projector. So I did that. I raised like $6,000. I bought a decommissioned theater projector. I put it in the back of my pickup truck now. And if the police didn't like a 13 by 19 inch poster, now they have to deal with an 80 foot by 40 foot tall building projection of that same work. They definitely don't like that. But what it does is it started to build these impromptu round tables on the street. So people would stop, and that's all I ever wanted to do, was to be able to connect with one person to be able to talk, and that's what this is. So this is the first little stop motion I made that became a projection. And there's a song that plays behind this real quick. I was doing some work at Westchester University in Pennsylvania, and we were doing this stop motion, and a student showed up there that told me that he was really heavy in opioid use. He was using OxyContin almost every day. He's trying to get clean. He saw some of my work, and he was like, man, I like to write music. He started to write music about this, and this is helping him to stay clean. And now I collaborate with this kid, and he's been in recovery now for a couple of years, but he wrote this song. He showed up in the middle of this theater where we're shooting these photos I'm gonna show you, and just like spit this song on the spot, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. So I had a friend in Philly, and I got him, and he did like a rough recording of this song.
In the middle of humanity, surrounded by bodies, we're filled with ideas, interests, and some hobbies. Some of them productive, some of them don't give a fuck, some of them are stuck, dying just to live enough. I swear that I don't live enough. My ideas can be the lubricant, loop confused with substances, abusers, cruel and stupid shit, troublesome and dumb, stumbling through thoughts. So what you're watching is someone going through the stages of shooting up, nodding off, overdosing, and then dying. And this like terrible kind of like bruising that's happening is called livor mortis. It's what happens to bodies when they die, and the body stops pumping blood. It pools in the areas where the person was laying. This is what my brother looked like when I found him. So you'll see these types of passages in my prints also. That's what you're looking at. So, and this is just stop motion photography, right? So a simple thing your students can do, just put a camera on a tripod, take a bunch of pictures, move, take a bunch of pictures, move, take a bunch of pictures, and you can make an animation like this. I never did it before. So you get a sense for it. So that's the first one that I made. And then I did an installation in an art museum. This work was never meant to be in the museum, but they allowed me to solicit people for money to get for this GoFundMe. So I had like a computer set up there that you could add to it. So it was a really dirty trick. You had to see this terrible work and then decide to not give money to it when you walk past it. So it worked. We raised this money, and then we were able to do that was part of the installation.
I was able to buy this projector here, and you can see my really high-tech setup of a $20,000 projector sitting on top of a coffee table for my living room. It's like AV people were like, "What are you doing?" So I started to do. I did this first projection on the left-hand side just as a test, and I was in this like alley, kind of late at night, doing this thing in a not so great part of my town, and I shot it on this building. And as soon as it went up, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be really something." And I saw this kid like coming down the alleyway, and I was like, "Oh man, this kid's gonna fuck with me. This is not gonna be good." He came up and he stopped and he turned around and pulled his phone out, and so I shot a couple of images, and then he came over to me and he like gave me £1 and was like, "This is what people need to see." And I was like, it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up right now, because if I can get him to buy into what I'm doing, somebody, I could get anybody to do it, I think. So that started this work now where I'm, hold on a second here. So this is the very first one. The first one that I did for the public in my hometown was on the side of the funeral home. Most of the overdoses in my town are laid out here. So this is the first one that I did. It included some of that time lapse, and then this message to our local coroner that I want him to do a better job. What's great about, and this is where it gets into using digital tools, this is a simple way of taking something out of its element, like as a room like this, putting it on the street, using this dynamic tool. And that's for a designer. Like, think about that. Like, for a designer, I think the best thing we could ever design is a book. We have this huge thing that we can fill up with our content. Now imagine if your entire city is your book, and you can now fill up your entire city with your content, and nobody can stop you from doing it. A client does not have to hire you to do this. You just have to have the, and that's just not to say, like, I'm scared every time that I do it, because I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I also think that's great for students to get into that spot too. I've done workshops now where I go to cities. I did it in Chicago, and I taught a workshop. We made projections, and then we went out into Chicago and projected in the city, and those students had to be on the street with their work. They had to let people come up to them and engage them about their work. I mean, when's the last time you saw a designer on the freeway being like, "See that billboard up there? Like, I did that thing up there." That never happens. So it makes them have to really own what they're doing. So I can't encourage you guys enough to do more things like that with your students, that get them to have to actually engage the people that are going to consume whatever it is they're going to make.
Where do you have the projector?
It's in my pickup truck, that imagery you saw in the pickup truck. So it's just in the back of my pickup truck.
Across the street?
Across the street, yeah. So the only thing about this is you just have to be careful. Like, the only law you can really break is like blinding someone. So you have to make sure it's like, but what's awesome about projectors is if you're on a line with a projector, it will blind you. But if it is just up that far, it's like a little flicker in the distance. So it becomes like, if you're trying to like hide from somebody with something like this, you can do it, and you can make something really bold that is just like undeniable. And in my hometown, I mean, in New York, there's a couple of projection groups that do stuff like this, but in my hometown, this has never happened before. So imagine some place where their art is like something that came from like one of those like drinking wine and painting things, to then seeing a full-scale building projection that like blow their minds. So this is the one. So again, with this type of work too, you have to be careful. Like this one, this area right around the corner right there is one of the biggest dope spots in my city. So there were people selling on the street like when I did this projection, and it said heroin is sold on this block. It wasn't so much for them. I wasn't trying to call them out, because that's going to happen. It doesn't matter. But it's for us. For us, we walk by that and we're like, "Oh yeah, we know that's there. We know people are dying there, but that doesn't have anything to do with us. It has nothing to do with my family, nothing to do with my kids." Until your kid dies, and then you become an activist. So we have to start thinking about this. Originally, this idea was, and this is when I was getting a little brash. I'd done a couple of these, and I'm starting to be like, "Oh yeah, I can really like push the envelope." I was going to get on the top of buildings and actually project on the dope houses in my town. And my wife was like, "Yeah, you're not doing that shit. Like, that's not happening." we live in this city. Like, so that's the thing. Like, you have to gauge it back. Like, is it, not to mention, I think people that are selling right now need to be held accountable because they're selling poison. But the fact of the matter is, they're the least of our worries in this situation. I mean, this entire epidemic was constructed by high capitalism in the United States. The Sackler family and Purdue Pharma, if you guys haven't been following the news, I mean, they premeditatively made a drug that was going to subjugate people. That's it. And to date, it's killed 400,000 people. And not one of that family or on that corporate board are in jail right now for that. So these people that are selling $3 bags of heroin, and that's how much it costs right now to buy a bag of heroin, $3. I mean, yeah, I think they need to not be doing what they're doing, but at the end of the day, they're not remotely the problem. I started signing my work with that. Yeah, it's just like a simple. It's like it comes from like the history of like the Puritan eye, right? So if you guys don't know what that is, obviously, like I grew up Catholic, so in like the Catholic Church, there was this giant eye at the top, and the reason that was there is so that we know that He's always watching us. So when you went home and jerked off, you saw that eye in your head, and you're like, should I be doing this right now? So that's where it comes from. Yeah, you regret asking that now because I told you. Yeah. So anyways, I was gonna project on houses. I couldn't do that because it would have put my family in harm's way. But what was amazing, and I don't have the images in here. The next day, there were 3 anonymous Facebook pages that were made that were copying my typography, white on top of the actual spots that I was gonna do that. So it was like that. For whatever this stupid projection, empowered someone to do the exact thing that I was too afraid to do. That's what we're supposed to do with this work, right? We have to be doing more. I'm going to harp on this. We have to be doing more than teaching our students that our work feeds the marketplace. I understand that's hard because education is crazy expensive, but you have to think about it. It's more important than that. Significantly, no matter how much money you make, it's more important than that. So there's the high-tech setup again. So I run it off of a generator in the back of my truck, so a little portable generator, and then this coffee table. And the police now will come out and be like, yeah, you can't do that. And I'll be like, all right, man, that's cool. I'll drive around the block and I'll do another building. And they have to find me again. And then I'll say, you can't do that. And we'll have to play that. And I'll just keep doing that. So again, like how these are built, just so you're thinking about like what you could offer to your students. So it's simple. I mean, I'm making simple vector images, and then I'm taking them into Premiere, which I'm assuming you guys are using it in the crudest manner possible, and then making something out of this. So you don't have to have crazy high-tech digital tools to do things that can be massively powerful. Not to mention, I mean, think about how much it would cost. Like if I had to pay to get something that big put on a building, I mean, Chris, what do you think that would cost? $20,000. Yeah, $20,000. So yeah, and that's on the low side probably in some places. If you're doing it like New York City, it could be $100,000. So we can do it anytime we decide. So it's hacking into this advertising system in a way that they do not like that at all. But that's what we're here to do. We're here to push. And start conversations and get people to ask questions. So that's for the students that are here. I will tell you guys, and I guarantee you from one of the professors in here, or professors you've heard this, that your work has to be a call to action. I'm going to challenge that and tell you your work does not have to be a call to action. It just has to be a call to question, meaning you have to get someone to walk away and ask one question from what you did, and now that stone has been dropped, that ripple now goes. Action will happen. But the idea that I'm going to make something that's going to end the opioid epidemic is never going to happen. Nor should I put that weight on myself. A call to action is you see this really great billboard for Coke, and you go buy a Coke because you're like, oh, I related to that. That's a call to action. This type of work, it does not have to be a call to action. The most important poster ever made, activist poster probably, is the Silence Equals Death poster. If you don't know that, you should look it up. It was made during the AIDS period. It's just a pink triangle that says Silence Equals Death. It said everything. And it made us ask questions. So I don't want you to put that pressure on yourselves. Because I think sometimes with this type of work, people will be, I think Paul even asked me, I forget the question, like, you don't know where to start? Like, how do you start doing this work? You just do it. I didn't know what I was doing. I just did something, and now I'm able to talk to a much larger audience, and you're inviting me to Franklin Pierce University to tell you about my work. Let's see what's going on here. We'll skip that one. So this was another one. Sometimes, like I said, God works in real good ways. This wasn't planned. It looks like a sound stage. I mean, the lights were there. It rained, so we didn't know we were going to be able to do the projection. It stopped raining, and then this thing happened. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so powerful. That's just a video of it. It's not. So also, like, this is a good example of like knowing how to use your tools. Like I made my video. I have no idea how to use Premiere that well, and exported it and it cut like half my typography off. So maybe you should test your shit before you go out. People are like, what does it say? I'm like, no, I tried that. Like, you have to work for it more. I'm like, I didn't know. No, I messed up. And that's why it looks like that. So it just goes through the same thing. And then this one. And then, okay, so on top of this, like I'm getting my MFA at this time at the Vermont College of Fine Art, where Chris and I both graduated from. I cannot talk more highly about this, but I know I'm here at Franklin Pierce, but I'm going to just talk about Vermont College of Fine Art for a second. Changed my life. During this time where I was in intense grief and not knowing what I was going to do, I went to this place that allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do with massive support. And I worked with people that were just amazing. So as part of my research towards this is like, how can I continue to do work like this and not be dead in a couple of years because I'm like pushing myself too hard or put myself in harm's way, or I jump off a bridge because it's too depressing. So I started to reach out to other artists and designers around the country, people that were my heroes, to ask them that very question. So I started to gather that information, and then part of that was for my thesis show at Vermont College of Fine Art, I asked some of these artists if they would send me work for borrow to hang up and put on this show of this of the show that I would want to see to talk about these things. So what happened though is I started to get this work from all over the country. And when I got it, my wife and I were laying it out, and I was like, I don't want to give any of this work back. Like, how can we keep this work? So I reached out to this artist here. If you guys don't know this name, Sue Ko, you need to know who Sue Ko is. She is, in my opinion, the most important activist artist working right now. And she's been doing this and committed for her whole life. So she was one of the ones that I like amazingly was able to talk to, and we kind of hit it off. And I wrote to her and I was like, look, this is my idea. I want to start a nonprofit where I collect work like this with the idea that it will travel to colleges and universities. The colleges and universities can have it for free, but they have to commit to writing curriculum around the exhibition. That's the stipulation. And she was like, I thought she'd be like, nah. And she's like, go to my website, pick out whatever work you want, and I'm going to send it to you today. I was like, all right, this is going to work. So she sent me work. This is an artist, Eric Avery. I'm now collaborating with Eric Avery. This piece of work right now, there are 10 of these. One's in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one's in MoMA, one's in the British Museum, one's in my garage right now. So like that's, so you can see the importance of, they knew that what I was saying, and I had this like passion behind what I was trying to do, and they're supporting it, and they want to be a part of it. Oh, the other stipulation too, if someone here is like percolating, like maybe we could bring it to Franklin Pierce, the only other stipulation is that you have to bring one living member of the collection here to speak with it. So maybe you bring Sue Ko or Eric Avery or someone, they need to come and be able to talk about it, but I want curriculum built around it. There's nothing worse than art museums on college campuses. They're nothing more than like breeze-throughs. They have to be more than that. Museums are not meant for that. They're not vacation destinations. Like, you're supposed to go in there, take something from that place and take it back into your life. But often they become this like breeze through, like, because we're so visually bombarded that we don't slow down. So this is part of that. Part of it too is like right there, Chris, you probably recognize that on the left there. That's Brick by Brick. They're a coalition and group of designers and artists. Nikki Yuen, who's one of the professors at Vermont College of Fine Arts, she was one of the founders of that. So they wear these jumpsuits, and all those little colored blocks on there are comments that Trump has made about women. So you look better on your knees, you're a pig, all of these things are in there, and then they make these giant silent human walls in front of areas where they kind of stand in solidarity together. They're very beautiful, super powerful. And she donated one of the jumpsuits to this project, which I'm like honored to have it. This is my latest acquisition to this. This is Leopoldo Mendez, Mexican printmaker from the 30s and 20s, 30s, 40s. Again, the Taller de Grafica Popular was a artist collective in Mexico that was doing politically driven work. And this piece was just added to the collection. So, okay, so it gets into this. So now I'm doing these projections on a local level. And someone was like, well, why don't you start to go after some of like the architects? So I'm learning more about Purdue Pharma. I'm learning more about the Sackler family. And I also realized that their corporate headquarters is like a 5-hour drive from my hometown. I'm like, all right, we got to do something there. So this is a $14 billion a year company. And we showed up there and did this. So Purdue Pharma has no branding on their building, none, purposely. So they are this glass monolith in Stamford, Connecticut that makes $14 billion a year, no branding. So I went there and I branded them, and they didn't like it. So what we didn't have here is like at a certain point, all these suits start pouring out of the building down there, and they're like coming out and they're looking at the projection, and they're taking photographs of it, and they're yelling at each other. It was awesome. And we drove back to Pennsylvania that night, and my brother and I, my older brother Charlie and I, were talking about how we just, they could never figure out how to arrest us that night. They wanted to, but they couldn't figure out a way to do it because we weren't really breaking the law. Projection is awesome because it's silent. It's like the epitome of nonviolent direct action because it's big and loud and it's silent. And that's that didn't sound like they're actually near the generator, but it's a silent thing. That's like Jesus.
It leaves no residue.
That's right.
Shut the thing off and it's gone.
Yeah. So and that's where they get tricky. We're trying to figure out like how they can stop you. Yeah.
So, Adam, I
Mhm.
honestly hate to interrupt you
Yeah.
because I love what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
But I do want to give people time for questions,
Sure.
if that's okay.
Yeah. I'll just like as you're asking, I'll scroll through some more of these slides.
Right. And please, since this is being recorded, please wait to ask your question until I give you the microphone. Okay, so I mean, we've been exposed to a lot of really thought-provoking stuff. So what questions do you have for Adam?
So real quick, just like I say, this is Eric Avery. This is this artist I'm collaborating with. This is him in 1979. He was the head of a refugee camp in Somalia, and we're now collaborating together on work.
Yeah, your passion, to say the least, is palpable, and you were apologizing. Well, I think you were trying to be polite when you were apologizing for a rant, but it goes right along with your design principles. So your narrative, it's not like you're just talking. It seems like it just connects with every image that you have, and I think that's a pretty powerful lesson to convey to students. But I wanted you to reflect on this. I mean, do you think that being able to connect like that, your oral expression with this visual communication, has it helped you, I guess you could say, not temper, but like moderate sort of the way you engage other people?
It's a really good question. It has. I think the last thing that people want is someone like speaking at them, and I think it's really easy when you're passionate to do that. So I'm trying not to do that, even though I just did that to you guys for the last hour. Although you asked me to do it, so you got what you asked for. But I think it's important. Like again, and that's the reason why I talked about this. Like in activist work, it's easy to be polarized, to do something hard on one side or the other. It's not hard, it's not easy to figure out a way to pull people in when you still feel very much on that side. Because I still feel I feel like we need radical approaches, but I know that if I'm going to get bureaucrats to give money to solution finding, I can't do it that way. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out, and I'm asking the question to myself: should I do that though? I don't know. I mean, when I read James Baldwin, he never did that, right? I mean, so he stayed on one side of the entire time, and maybe that's the reason why he's not as widely accepted on college campuses and is in curriculum, possibly. But I still think that he was doing it the right way. But I am interested though. What I'm most interested in right now is engaging students to their responsibilities, and not worrying about thinking about everything you have to do has to be monetized in some way. And that's the thing about this work. I don't sell any of this work. The projections, they're not for sale. I'm outside of the capitalist system, so that makes me really dangerous because it's not on the stipulation that I have to get something. I mean, I would probably came to Franklin Pierce for free. I mean, I'll take the money now, but it's like, but I would have came for free. The point is like, so I'm ranting again. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just one more question. You mentioned that you always write. Do you still always write whenever you create a visual work?
Yeah.
Okay, so if folks were to assign students, so I'm not sure how they go about assigning the kinds of things, but they can figure it out. You always recommend to teachers that they assign written work with the visual creation.
Totally. I mean, and that can be a hard sell some places. I mean, I'm an adjunct at a bunch of places. Pennsylvania College of Art and Design is one of them. I had an academic dean Last year he's no longer there, thankfully, but I had my illustration students writing, and they were all bitching and moaning about it because they didn't want to do it. They went to the dean, and I got called in, and I was told that writing is not important. They should be drawing. Well, how the fuck do you draw if you don't know if you don't know what you're drawing about? How do you do it? And then what you're getting is just like off the cuff stuff that a creative can do. And we can make images. We can spew images. You can go on Google Images right now and find 6,000 of them, and that's spew. How do you get through that? How do you cut through that with images? And the only way I think you do that is by deep research into your subject matter and writing, and make it a part of it. Make them do it. I think that once they get a flavor for it, they'll love it. I think I right now would prefer writing over making prints at the moment, because I make myself do it as a practice.
I know I don't have a microphone. I think what you just said, I wish I could like yellow highlight that right now on the video, but thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if success is a metric that you use or how you measure it, but you say you use your art to start conversations. So do you feel like your art has been successful in modifying people's attitudes towards these issues in your hometown?
Well, I mean, I know that my work has allowed other people to gain a voice that didn't have a voice before. So this slide is actually perfectly timed. So museums now are interested in this work for the aesthetic, and I have no interest in that. So the only way they're allowed to get my work is they allow us to set up a harm reduction space in the museum. So in this museum, there's a needle exchange, there is a naloxone training, there is all of this stuff going on, and it's always local. So it always has to be something local that's happening, so I'm giving them a voice. So in that way, I feel like it's been successful because I'm allowing them to have a voice they wouldn't have had before by doing that.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
As a person who lived through the AIDS crisis, it is spookily similar, and
coming back again because of this.
Well, yeah, injectables. It's interesting because I began as much more of an activist than I have been of recent because of the economic realities, perhaps. I still think school is a place to push the envelope and do this, and I'm delighted that you brought up the ACT UP, and I was also thinking of Queer Nation and thinking how the digital age has progressed from stickering up things and buying big poster things that go over, New York City, skyline, into this projection, and I'm amazed at it. And so I suppose this is an appreciation and also a thank you for reminding me that what's important is helping students find their passion.
Sure.
And not just the next place they're going to get a paycheck. So thank you, and I have to go teach, but I wanted to thank you very much.
So the one thing I will say real quick about that is that, that's what I've noticed. That's why I know this is important, because the students, when I travel and speak, the students are eating this up too, because they're hungry for this type of work. So I would encourage, do as much as you possibly can to get them engaged in their, and not just like in like hypothetical, like get them engaged. There's lots going on in every community. You just have to tie them in and let them work with those folks, and I think they're hungry for it. I also think it's what's going to save fine art programs in colleges. Fine art programs are going away because they're not as relevant as they used to be anymore. You can't have someone laboring away on a college campus doing a Baroque painting for 2 months anymore. You can't do it. And that's the reason why they're getting gobbled up, because they can't figure out a way to monetize. The way that they can monetize it is getting fine artists to be working with community action groups and making work that supports what's going on, which is really what they should have been doing all along. There's a time for that other type of art, but right now is not the time. And I think you're seeing those programs going away everywhere because of that, and us not staying tied into the time.
So thank you for coming and sharing your work and your message. Are you receiving any pushback for your activism, either in the institutions you're affiliated with, by administration, or even by students or parents?
I mean, the one good thing is that I'm a roving adjunct, so I don't have to deal with as much of the bureaucracy that everybody else does. They have to deal with it after I'm gone, and then justify like, why did you let this guy come and do this? I'm like, I think in most cases, the only one that really pushed the envelope is I did a student project where I let them use projection, and one of the students really liked that heroin is sold on this block piece, and she just did one that said heroin is used on this campus, and the president of the college went through the roof, only because it's true. I mean, it's true, but if they acknowledge it, then they have to do something about it. I mean, right now, I would imagine someone has died on this campus from overdose. You probably just don't know it. And often it's like student died unexpectedly, and that's where they leave it at that. We need to say student died of a fentanyl overdose, because then we can save every other student on the campus. But then to do that, you have to acknowledge it, and then acknowledging it means maybe our enrollment's not going to be as good. But just like short answer, no, I haven't gotten a lot of pushback, because I also think that it's like some of the stuff that I'm talking about is undeniable. Like I'm not spouting something that isn't happening right now. I think some of the students, like we worry so much too about like triggering the students through the work. I am worried about that, but I also think that our students need to be triggered a little bit, and a little bit of trauma is not a bad thing. I mean, our body allows us to feel pain for a reason, because it lets us know that we're alive, and we have to do that. I mean, that's the reason why, like, during this opioid epidemic too, this idea of like getting rid of pain, like we have to have it. If you don't know you have a bad toothache, you could die. So you have to have it. So it's an totally American convention that we need to eradicate pain. And some of it is like triggering students, or I've gotten overwhelming support from the parents. We had a student come, my show was at York College of Pennsylvania where I teach, and one of the kids was coming through with a parent that were thinking about York College, and the exhibition actually made them come. They enrolled because he was like, this is the kind of work I want my kid to be thinking about. So I was like, wow, I was like, York College, you can give me some dough from that, but I haven't seen any check from them.
Have you had our open houses?
So I'm also, like, I'm collaborating with other folks too. I don't have time to show you guys this stuff, but I do want to just share real fast, because it's super exciting. Like the next phase of this work, because projections are now being stopped. I was down in Mexico doing some work just a little bit ago, sorry about this image. I know it's terrible, but I'm using augmented reality now, which is, if you guys have seen kids like doing Pokemon Go, augmented. So basically, I could place something in this room, and you could find it with your device. So my prints now will have augmented reality embedded in them. So when you go over them, a whole nother layer will come out. So I've been taking, I have to actually, let me exit out of this so you can hear the audio real fast. This, I'm only gonna play a second of this. It's terrible to listen to, but you get the idea. That is a minute video of someone getting their head cut off in Mexico. Those are on the internet for us to find every single day. It's also important that we know that those things are there and we're pulling them out and that we're doing something with that. So as Americans, we can also be like, I'm not even gonna think about that. So I took this audio, and I'm working with an audio engineer right now, and this, what you're gonna listen to here, is the exact same thing. That is that audio, just cut apart, put effects on, twisted around. So what you're listening to right now is someone being beheaded, but it's the audio used in a different way. So this is another way where you can use technology in a really simple way to do something profound. So I feel bad that I'm embedding your brains right now with a beheading, with this sound, but it's a way, again, we have to get closer to these things. We have to consider them, because the price of American consumption in America is that. That's it. What we see are little white bags that are neatly, like little hermetically sealed pieces of meat in the grocery store that have no trauma attached to them. You take that back to the slaughterhouse, and it's a completely different thing. And it's the same with the drugs. We see this little thing we buy, and right now in Mexico, they're on track to have 40,000 murders just like these this year. And it's all about American consumption, because we consume their products. And that product right now is heroin and cocaine are the two biggest ones. Also, because marijuana is now legal in the United States, and we make the best marijuana in the world here, we're not buying their product anymore, so they're pushing more cocaine and more heroin, because we just took 30% of their market away. Those are the type of stuff we don't think about when we're like, oh, weed being legalized is amazing. Yeah, it is, but it has effects like this other places. So there's that, and then so I have like AR embedded into prints. what time we got? 12. We're a couple minutes over. And then the last thing I'll show you, because this is what I'm really excited about, but you guys have you guys are videotaping this. So shit, I'm not telling you this anyway. So yeah, you're college. Well, no, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the fact that this hasn't dropped yet. So we're going to take over the entire first floor of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York with AR. So that's important because the Sackler family, who owns Purdue Pharma, paid for almost the entire Egyptian wing of the Met. So in there'll be a story told from all the way back. Your device will start a cue that will play audio that tells the story of one person that has died. This girl named Mariah Lottie. And when you get to the back and you go through the doors of the Temple of Dendor, all of the signage in the room will change to a memorial gallery to her. The entire Temple of Dendor will turn into a movie screen, and it'll be movies of Mariah when she was a kid. So it's going to be a living memorial to her on top of the most important art museum in the world. We're working on it. I think my hope is our hard deadline is January 1st. So when this is the last thing I'll play for you. I know we're over time, but it's important. So this is the audio you'll hear when the signage changes.
My daughter's name is Mariah Lottie. She was murdered by the family whose name adorns this wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Sackler family's goal was capitalism at all costs, and their reward was beyond imagination, and a trail of death and destruction that has left them or fractured. Those left behind searching for answers they will never receive. Today we rename this wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in honor of Mariah Lottie, the memorial to her and to the true cost of the addiction epidemic killing our country. We do this with capital and with our blood.
So that's like the only canned thing that I recorded that's going to happen. But then there's going to be that story will be told always. And this will be just the first location. The Fogg Museum at Harvard is the next location. Guerrilla action. Yeah, they have no idea. And right now we're ahead of the law. So we've been working with law. Well, yeah, they can't. But we've talked to law professors at. Yeah, exactly. So it's. I mean, we're actually ahead of the law. There is no law in the digital space yet to stop this. There's no law in the digital realm to stop this yet. So we've been working with law professors at DePaul University that are significantly smarter than I am. They can figure out all that part of it. So what do you mean? Yeah, so basically what it is like when you use AR, like you look through your phone and it looks like you're taking a picture, and all of a sudden, like I could put a person next to you based on GPS coordinates right there, sitting with you, and they actually exist in this room, and we don't know they're there.
There's no physical object that triggers it. It's based on where you are geographically.
Well, it's two ways. There's geolocation, there's trigger images. So we're using both in here. So the artworks will trigger. So the only thing that'll mess up is if they move the artwork around, it'll mess up the narrative.
You're not adding objects. You're using their.
Yeah, so yes. No. That's basically the idea. The idea is hacking the audio tour in major museums.
Meaning that there's no evidence for them to find.
No, just all of the videos that are going to be made of people doing this is going to be great.
And if you remember, some of you were in the audience when Heather Snyder Quinn was here, and Adam's going to be working with Heather.
Yeah, Heather's my partner on this.
Yeah, so that's kind of tying it all together here with Ideal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so Heather's the techno person. I'm the activist. So I'm trying to get her to not be so afraid. She's trying to make me not so much a dumb shit when it comes to technology. So we're like a really good partnership. So anyway, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, and again, I'm very loath to cut short the conversation, but that's sort of my role here. Sorry, but anyway, let's give Adam a huge hand.
I will make the keynote talk available to all of you guys too, so you guys can take time and look at it. So if you want to have it, I'll give it to Chris or somebody, and you guys can have that.
This deserves such a much broader audience than people who are able to attend today. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.